Well, good morning, everybody. It's great to be back. Good to see you all. I missed you guys from last year. I am now the CEO of TeamOne Logistics. If you haven't gotten one of my emails, you will. I see a lot of laughing faces. Would love to communicate, also err on the side of over-communicating. A lot of great information this morning. You got a lot more coming this afternoon. Just by a quick show of hands, who here is at their first summit? Who hasn't been to the summit before? All right, so just while you got your hands up, everybody that didn't raise their hands, make sure you find one of those people. Make sure you ask them what they're doing, what they liked about the summit, what they'd like to see, and make sure they can come back again next year and tell a couple friends. So without further ado, we're going to get into our panel that we have this morning for you. That's a rapid-fire transportation panel. We've got basically the leading experts on all things transportation and logistics in the state of Georgia. They're going to have a quick presentation, 7-8 minutes, and then we're going to have a great opportunity to ask questions towards the end after they've all done. So be thinking about questions. Don't hold back. These guys are not shy. You should not be either. So our first presentation, to get right into it, is going to be around our airports. Miguel Southwell, who's the Aviation General Manager for Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. You can look in your agendas and read more about their bio and their expertise in their particular industries. So without further ado, Miguel Southwell.
Thank you, Paige, and good morning to you all on behalf of Mayor Kasim Reed. It's a great pleasure for us to be here this morning. We have 7 to 8 minutes. I'll spend 2 minutes talking about our 8 initiatives. People walk up to me and say, what's your top priority at an airport? Well, when you have a huge airport like Hartsfield-Jackson, you don't just have 1 or 2, you have several. And so I'll spend 2 minutes going through our 8 initiatives. I'll spend about 3 minutes on cargo, because I know most of you want to talk about logistics, and about 2 minutes about our passenger growth. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about cargo and passengers without giving you the kind of backdrop on the 8 priorities that we're pursuing. The first is, of course, cargo development. Mayor Reed has set as a priority growing jobs at the airport, and of course, we have about 60,000 employees on campus every day at the airport, but during the night time, of course, we don't have as many people working, and that's because we don't have the major cargo volumes that we'd like to have. You can't have an airport with such massive development without having a master plan for the capital program. And so that's just about completed, and we're looking to build, in the future, a new runway, new terminals, new parking facilities. At every airport, there's an agreement between the airport and the airlines, primarily dealing with rates and charges. The airlines would like to know what their rates, how their rates are going to be calculated, give them a sense of their cost 20, 30 years out into the future. So we're in those negotiations, and they're going quite well. These negotiations, by the way, can shorten the term of any airport general manager, but it's going extremely well. As I've said before, you don't want to be the general manager for Hartsfield-Jackson and have the airport lose its #1 status as the world's busiest passenger airport. And don't believe all this hype you're hearing about Chicago. We are still the busiest airport in the world. Or as the mayor likes to say, the busiest airport on the planet. You know, it's interesting. We want to raise the guest experience at the airport. And it's a pretty tough thing to do, primarily because the main ingredient are the people. And Atlantans and Georgians are just simply hospitable people. And so we have the main ingredient, and it's a bit of a challenge for us to raise that bar. But the mantra that we have now is try to figure out what you want and then surprise you. So as you go into the restrooms in the future or the parking lots, don't expect everybody jumping out at you and surprising you like that. But we will try to exceed your expectations. You can't do all these things without having the people to help you do it. You need people to help you do it. You need to be organized well. And the Atlanta City Council, the mayor has approved a new reorganizational plan that's already in place. And you absolutely can't do all of these things without finding the money to do it. So we're looking at ways to grow revenue. And we have a number of initiatives that we're pursuing. Not the least of which is we have a vast amount of real estate assets that are lying dormant, and we've hired some folks. We're dealing with realtors, and in the future we're looking to be able to use those assets so that they will contribute to the bottom line. And note that what we're trying to do is to grow revenue without those costs being the burden to airlines. So we're looking to raise non-airline revenues. We have a great relationship with all of our stakeholders, but there's always room for improvement, and we're looking to do those things. Now to cargo development, because I know that's why many of you are here. There are really two things that are impacting our growth in cargo. The first is we don't have adequate and enough facilities. And the second thing is that we're simply not participating in the growth area of air cargo, which is perishable goods. Meats, cut flowers, pharmaceuticals, things that require refrigeration. We don't have the proper infrastructure for it, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So one of the things we have to do is target on imports. And that is, we have to target cut flowers from Colombia and Ecuador. We have to target Chile, where you have quite a bit of fish coming out of Chile. Most of the fish imported into the country comes from Chile. But some of it comes as far away as tilapia from Uganda. It's a really great business, but we're not participating. Anytime you tackle imports, the operator, the aircraft owner, has to have cargo going in the other direction. And you folks in logistics, you know that. And so we have to be able to consolidate more freight here in Atlanta, so that the consolidation to Latin America and the Caribbean doesn't only take place in Miami's airport, and the consolidation of freight to Asia doesn't just consolidate in Los Angeles and to Europe at JFK. And so we're working to build, especially transit cargo from Latin America to Europe and Asia. We want Atlanta to be the choice. You know, it seems strange that you're talking about cargo, but I'm mentioning passenger service. Here's the thing. You have to start small. And we really do want to have big freighters because we get the big bang for our buck when you have all cargo planes. But if you want to build that service, you really have to count on your passenger service to fill the belly of the aircraft with cargo as a start. And so we have a very robust air service development program that we're building. We're onboarding the experts to help us build the cargo service. As I said earlier, we don't have adequate facilities on the airport, and we're land constrained at the airport. So we will have to acquire additional land to grow the footprint of the airport in ways that don't impact communities. So first we have to secure land, then we have to build the cargo facilities, and the right cargo facilities. Right now, the processing of the storage of cargo once it gets to the airport is centralized in a small facility that's on the north side of the airport. What we want to get to is a point where all of the warehouses at the airport have their own perishable storage facilities, their own refrigeration. But you know, it's kind of like the chicken and the egg. They say, you know, Miguel, you know, we have to get the volume of perishable goods first before we build those facilities. And so we're working through that as well. Airports take a lot of money, and the new master plan is about a $5 billion. We just completed almost a $6 billion master plan where we built new terminals, a new fifth runway, et cetera. The new master plan will call for another $5.5 billion over the next 15 years or so. And so we're looking to build partnerships. We're hoping to attract some P3s, public-private partnerships, where we team up with private investors, which is something we never did before. As an airport, we sort of frowned on having P3s because, you know, it's not that we don't have the money or the wherewithal to finance additional warehouses. It's just that there are so many competing interests for it. And so, especially in cargo warehouses, quite frankly, there is an oversubscription of investors who want to build warehouses on airports. And so we're going to be inviting those people in. And of course, as I said, you really get your big bang for your buck. So in areas where we have a large buildup of cargo, we want to incentivize airlines to use all cargo operations. We'll be talking to the UPSs and the FedExes of the world as well as we look at especially things like cut flowers as well. At the end of the day, you have to be out there pitching your destination. And so we, as I said earlier, we'll have some additional staffing by the end of July that will be helping to work with our industry partners, Chris Carr, the Metro Chamber, and various economic development groups to help us build the cargo by getting the message out there to both airlines, freight forwarders, and consolidators. Then, just lastly, I want to talk about passenger service. We have a very robust passenger service program, and you might say, well, you're already the world's busiest passenger airport, so what's this about? Part of it is my career. The second thing, however, is we do believe there's a direct correlation between the amount of passenger service and routes that you have at an airport and your ability to attract additional investment, not only from national companies, but from foreign direct investment. I can share with you, look folks, there are 1,500 German companies in the state of Georgia, 1,500. That would simply not happen if we didn't have service, daily service by Lufthansa and Delta. It simply would not have happened. That Mercedes, as well as Porsche, have established their US headquarters in Atlanta is a direct correlation between the nonstop service every day, not only by Germany's national carrier, but by Atlanta's national carrier. The mayor has also said, look, one of the things that we're facing is about 64 million, or 2/3 of our passengers, are simply connecting from one flight to another. They're not coming to Atlanta. Only 1/3 of our passengers, a little over 30 million passengers a year, actually coming to or leaving Atlanta. And we believe that we can build this number. There are two areas that we can build the passenger traffic at our airport, and hence routes to other communities. The first is by building the origin and destination traffic. And how can we do this? Mayor Reed has convened the top marketing minds, some of the top marketing minds in Atlanta, to take a look at this issue. If we have 2/3 of our passengers, 64 million passengers a year, as a captive audience, they're simply connecting from one flight to another. What is it that we can say to them while they're here? What is it that they can see, feel, or experience while they're here at the airport to get them interested, if not compel them, to come back to Atlanta, to visit, to start a business? And the Mayor Reed has convened, I believe there are 9 companies to provide us with their greatest marketing minds. We have the Metro Chamber, of course. We have Turner Broadcasting, CNN. We have Coca-Cola. We have BBDO, one of the world's most successful advertising companies. And it goes, we have Edelson, just a number of great marketing minds. I tell you, I sat with these people for about 2 hours the other day, and I was just blown away. And all they're trying to do is to answer that question. What is it that we can do in the terminal while we have those 64 million passengers every year to get them interested or compelled to come back to visit or do business in Atlanta and the state of Georgia? And so that marketing task force should come back with a paper by July to help us do this. Our biggest partner on the passenger side is the Atlanta Convention Visitors Bureau. They do an amazing job for the city of Atlanta and the state of Georgia. And we're going to be focusing on things like medical tourism. A large number of folks from Latin America and the Caribbean come to Atlanta for their medical services. Shopping, my goodness. There's a lot of shopping going on. And I think I've shared this with you before, but I'll mention it again. If you want to get a sense of how much shopping people are doing in this country, anytime you come to shop here in the United States, you always want your bag wrapped by that shrink wrap plastic wrap that you see sometimes. The company in Miami that wraps bags pays the airport $9.6 million a year to wrap bags. Pays the airport, guarantees the airport $6.9 million a year just to wrap passengers' bags. That's how much shopping people are doing in this country. And we're not participating in it because we're not going after that business, and we will. I'll just skip to what we're doing, we have been doing, we're going to be more robust about it, which is working with our business partners including the state of Georgia. Chris Carr brought his entire team from the Georgia Economic Development Agency, and they talked with us about what we're doing, what we plan to do. We talked to them about what they're doing, and let me tell you, I've never seen this kind of enthusiasm to build partnerships. All those things we believe, will go to keep us the '1 passenger airport, but not only that, connected to the rest of the world. And just quickly, the second thing is the international market. The international market. 90% of all passengers are coming from the domestic market. Only 10% of our passengers are from the international market. And that growth segment is the trajectory is just very steep. It's 6-7% per year, primarily driven by Delta Airlines. And with the merger of American Airlines and United, we believe that there is a little bit of an opening to grab some of that dominance that American has in Latin America. So if you look at the schedules, look at the schedules every quarter, you will see more and more flights from Atlanta going to Latin America and the Caribbean area. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. So moving on, our next presenter, making his first Georgia Logistics Summit appearance as our new commissioner for the Georgia Department of Transportation, is Russell McMurry. Round of applause for Russell.
Thank you very much, Paige. It is my first summit, and so I'm very excited to be here. In fact, as Commissioner Carr mentioned and Governor Dill mentioned earlier, I'm at least 900 million more reasons excited to be here this morning than I knew yesterday at this time. So today is a great day. Thank you. What I wanted to do today is sort of give you an overview of how vital Georgia's transportation assets are for, obviously, logistics. You know that. We're vital to the goods, the movement of goods and people through this state and in this state. So today I want to go over two things. I'm going to sort of give you Georgia DOT's transportation assets and Georgia's transportation assets by the numbers. I'm an engineer, so I'm a numbers guy. Don't worry, there's no decimal places involved, okay? We're not going to get that involved. And sort of show you what those assets are to give you a basis of understanding of what Georgia has as transportation assets. And secondly, I want to give you just an update of some of the programs, plans, and projects we have that make a major difference in transportation movement of goods and people through this state. So you can play along with me if you want. We've got a lot of numbers to look at. 8 and 10. And if you can guess if you want to in your head and play along. 8th, Georgia is the 8th most populous state in this nation. I think probably most people know that. But 10th, we are the 10th largest transportation system in the nation. So when you look at those two numbers, we're top 10. Everybody likes to be top 10, right? So very important. 12th and 49th. 12 and 49 are our next numbers to look at. The 20th Annual Reasons Foundation Performance of State Highway Systems Review ranked Georgia 12th overall in the nation based on performance metrics based on pavement and bridge conditions, fatalities, urban congestion, rural congestion, and then how transportation funding is allocated into capital construction and capital maintenance. So we scored 12th in their 20th annual report, which was back in 2012. 49. We were ranked 49th in per capita spending until last night, I guess. So we've been ranked 49th in per capita spending, which I'm telling you is not a sad story, but a positive message that Georgia gets a great return on investment with their per capita spending and what we're able to do to be 12th in the nation in how Reasons has rated Georgia DOT and the state. So that's good. That is a great return on investment. And we're proud to take that to the next step as we move forward with the transportation funding bill that was passed last night and to continue to make Georgia not 12th, but work our way into top 10 as we should be. Got a bunch of numbers popping up. It's almost like bingo. So 4,100 and 17,967. Well, to be 12th in the nation to do the things we're doing It takes over 4,100 dedicated employees of Georgia DOT, the men and women of Georgia DOT, that actively plan, obviously working together with people like you in the logistics world to plan, design, construct, maintain, and then operate our transportation system across this state. Obviously, our transportation system being 10th is large. Georgia DOT is responsible for almost the 17,967 centerline miles of roadways out there across this state, which is a huge number, a large percentage in the state. I've got some funny things going on here with numbers. A big number, 300 million. That's not how much money I thought we were going to get out of the transportation bill. 300 million vehicle miles traveled daily in this state. That is a huge number. And we're seeing that number actually tick up a little bit. From a year, December of 14 back to December of 13, Georgia saw about a 4% increase in vehicle miles traveled. So things are ticking back up and seeing vehicle miles traveled. Our next numbers are 1,247, 1,807. Georgia is blessed with a big interstate network, which is vital for the goods and movement of freight and people. We have 1,247 miles of interstate in this state. Secondly, important is we have 1,807 miles of identified freight corridors outside of the interstates that provide that network that is so critical to deliver freight and goods. So combining that, Georgia DOT has almost a little over 3,000 miles of interstate and freight corridors to move commerce across and through this state. Okay, I got three numbers for you. 4,500, 29, and 2. Of course, we're proud of our surface transportation of roads and bridges, but there's a lot more to deliver commerce across this state beside roads and bridges. 4,500 happens to be how many miles of rail that exist in Georgia. We have 29 short line operators in Georgia, and of course 2 Class 1 operators with Norfolk Southern and CSX. The next numbers, 4 and 1, and these numbers you'll hear more about. 4th busiest container port in the nation with the Savannah port, and you'll hear more about that later. As we just heard from Miguel, the number 1, a great number, right? Number 1 busiest airport on the planet, not the world, but the planet. The next numbers, 103 and 128. Beside the busiest airport in the planet, there's 103 airports, general aviation airports across this state that serve you, that serve industry, that serves commercial and recreational aircraft that is so vital for economic development in this state. 128. We're here in Atlanta and we think about transit, we think about MARTA, but there's 128 transit providers across this state. 114 of those serve rural Georgia to make those vital trips for rural people to get to job centers and get back and forth, or to medical offices for care. There's 14 metro or urban transit providers across this state that does a fantastic job. So I've bored you with a lot of numbers. No decimal points were included, so I hope everybody's okay. So let's jump into, secondly, to talk about some of the plans, initiatives, and projects that really make a difference in transportation logistics. One, as I'm very proud of, is the Georgia Freight and Logistics Plan. Georgia was an early implementer before federal requirements that we worked ahead to have this state freight and logistics plan, which is so vital to the planning and everything that we do as a state. Georgia DOT really has a couple of guiding documents and principles that help us plan. The statewide transportation plan and the state strategic transportation plan. And that's really, we're combining those two together to really make the business case for transportation investment, couple that with our long-range planning so that we produce the projects that need to be produced that make a difference and move the needle on mobility for freight, goods, and people. And of course, a guiding tenet and major principle of that is incorporation of the state freight and logistics plan. And it's really the strategic approach that investments to accommodate freight growth and logistics needs statewide. This has been approved by the US DOT. Again, we were early implementer. I'm very excited about that. We're actually pursuing additional federal funding because there's an increased federal match, there's a less state match and increased federal funds available for states that have these plans identified and they're executing and delivering these projects. And we've adopted a network, the statewide freight corridor network. which is here. I know this is sort of hard to see, but you can see those red lines, and these are our interstate and freight corridors identified. And you can see there's easily 5 to 6 north-south routes and east-west routes across the state that provides for the movement of goods and people. Georgia's been investing somewhere between 20 and 30% in capital projects to continue to advance this freight network, and we'll continue to do so going forward so that we can take on initiatives such as bottlenecks and capacity locations with capacity challenges that need to be upgraded. Our state freight and logistics plan identified over a 40-year period, $18 to $20 billion of needs, 18 to 20 billion. And I'm excited about last night because that's a good step forward that we can work forward on those things. But 18 to 20 billion over 40 years has a return on investment of 65 billion in economic output, plus thousands and thousands and thousands of jobs. Very critical for our transportation planning. Now, as we move ahead, and we talked about the port a little bit, and you'll hear more about that, but Georgia DOT is so excited and always had a great partnership with Georgia Ports Authority to advance transportation infrastructure in and around the port for the goods of import and critically export in and out of Savannah. So if we walk around this map, and I know it's high level, to the right side is the Savannah River. So if we start at the very top, we've got identified a project that is a design-build project that will go to construction or be let to bid in May. And this is a divergent diamond interchange. Drive on the left side of the road to improve the efficiency of that interchange at Interstate I-95, State Route 21, which has a lot of port traffic in and out and a lot of commuter traffic to the north in and out to Savannah every day. To the right of that, as you can see, there is a project called Jimmy DeLoach Parkway, which is the last mile connectivity, which is critical, a freeway type roadway that connects down to the port to their main gate and up to the north that connects to an existing road that connects over to I-85, a freeway type connection for freight coming in and out that gets in and out and does not have to touch normal surface streets with traffic signals. We have a project there of an investment to upgrade Grange Road, which comes out, ties into Gate 8 at the port. And this is a total reconstruction and reinvestment in infrastructure to build a wider road with turn lanes and up the thickness of the pavement to provide long-lasting, durable surfaces for the freight in and out of the port. One project that is very exciting is another entrance into one of the gates is Brampton Road. It's sort of down in the bottom right of the screen. Is the Brampton Road connector that again ties I-516, makes a connection into the port. This project is under development now in design phase. The project down at the bottom is a critical bottleneck relief project that's been identified through the freight and logistics plan of the 2 interstate interchanges of I-16 and I-95. We will start the design on this project later in this year and start working toward a design solution to relieve this bottleneck in this location. To the left of the screen, sort of that red line to the left, very excited about the other part of Jimmy DeLoach Parkway, which makes the final connection from I-16 up to the existing roadway and provides, again, a limited access connection with grade separations or bridges over some key locations, again, that creates sort of an arc, if you will, from the port over to I-95 and back over to I-16 for the movement of goods in and out of the port. So we're excited about those projects that are either about to be under construction, or in the development stage. So they will certainly make a difference in logistics. Of course, let's talk railroads. Rail is important, and you'll hear a little bit more about rail. And Georgia DOT is actually sort of putting the final touches on our state rail plan update. And this has been a great effort with a lot of stakeholders, many of you in the room, many of the, of course, the rail operators, our Class 1s and our short line operators, but a lot of stakeholder involvement has been a very successful thing. One of the things that I found of interest of the rail update was sort of getting our update on what tonnage looks like. 189 million tons moved in Georgia each year. About 48% pass through Georgia. 34% of that freight is coming inbound. 13% goes outbound, and about 5% is intrastate, back and forth. But Georgia DOT is very much a partner in trying to work forward of continuing to enhance our rail activity. and our infrastructure. For instance, we have a new investment coming forward, a state investment of about $1 million to advance a short line up in Walker County that will put that rail line in with an industry that's bringing 150 jobs. So that's a tremendous and new investment in rail expansion. But also Georgia and Georgia DOT has to take care of our assets that we have. And we're excited that in this transportation funding budget this year, $1.8 million to extend or to provide rail upgrade in Southwest Georgia that serves 8 existing companies that serve about 1,300 employees. So again, strategic looking forward to try to build new capital, new infrastructure, but also stepping back, obviously taking care of what we have is critical as well. Looks like I've clicked on to the next thing, which is important for logistics and for mobility, and that's Georgia's managed lane solutions. We're very excited that Georgia DOT has been working in managed lane implementation plan for a number of years now. And what we say in Georgia is get in and get going. That's our tagline. And these managed lanes provide that. These are electronic toll lanes that are dynamically priced based on congestion. And so they provide really 3 key benefits to the user. First is, since it's dynamically priced and it's not just a toll road, all of us make a choice. Do we want to use this facility or not? So we can make that based on conditions, based on where we have to be. If it's a critical meeting we have to get to, or do we want to get to the kids' ball game in time? You know, all those things, it's a choice. So we're providing transportation choice. Secondly, there's a huge benefit to transit users. Transit is free. And for all the current transit riders now, they get trip reliability by paying the same fare. They get a guaranteed trip reliability. It makes their life much better. Also, the third main benefit is for everybody that chooses a managed lane, that's one less car or vehicle out of the general purpose lanes that makes the ride better for others. Also, the encouragement of transit now with trip reliability, which will be coming forward, more people will potentially take transit, which again frees up those general purpose lanes, which is very important for all mobility, for trucks, freight, passenger cars, and everybody to be able to have that advantage. So let's talk a little bit about what we have, our assets that we have. We have about 15 miles of hot express lanes now. So it's electronic toll lane, but if you're 3 people in your vehicle or more up in I-85 in Gwinnett County, northeast of Atlanta, it's free if you're 3 or more. Very exciting is 2 projects that we have under construction now. 29 new lane miles of barrier-separated, reversible managed lanes north of town, starting at 285, working our way north up to 575, up toward Woodstock in that area. Tremendous project that's under construction now, almost $800 million investment in providing managed lane solutions. To the south of Atlanta, and I-75 is the backbone artery of movements in this state. To the south, another 12 miles of new barrier-separated managed lanes that are reversible south of town from I-675, State Route 138, down through the McDonough area, down past State Route 20, down to State Route 155. Again, actively under construction. You ride up and down I-75 in this state, you can see all this massive construction. So we're very excited about that. The next project that's under development that will come to bid, a design build project that will come to bid this May, just a month away now, is the extension of the I-85 lanes that we have now. Another 10 miles of new managed lanes, not a conversion, but new managed lanes to the north, again, providing more opportunity for choice, transportation choice. So with all of those, you can see all these projects that we have underway, you can see that things are moving forward with providing transportation choice and solutions from a managed lane concept. When you put all that together, that's over about 60 miles of managed lanes. Georgia will have one of the biggest managed lane networks in the nation when all these projects come online and come to fruition, which the first one will come online will be I-75 South, followed by I-85, and then finally Northwest Corridor. Such a big project Northwest Corridor is. So let's look at some other things that we're doing, try to move the needle on logistics and mobility. Obviously making transportation investment and key critical roles such as bottlenecks. I mentioned the bottleneck in I-95 and I-16 in Savannah, but our biggest bottleneck in the region is at 285 and State Route 400. And if you're from Atlanta, you know that. It is the valve that affects all of 285, 75, and 85. When that valve shuts down, nothing moves in the northeast quadrant of the state or the metro area. This project is a design, build, finance project, so we're taking a P3 approach. It's a $1 billion investment in this state, and it's not a managed lane system. There's no tolls in it. It's simply an operational improvement by separating these interstate to interstate or interstate to freeway type connections that will make such a difference in mobility. We will make a best value selection in December, so that is quite exciting. This year, we will make a best value selection to advance this design, build, finance project over the next really about 4 to 5 years of construction to get done. This is a big project. Other things we've done are a little bit lower hanging fruit. If you drive around 285, you'll see the variable speed limit signs. Trying to maximize our system by reducing the speed, and if you slow down, you might get there faster. And so again, from a safety point of view and trying to help move the mobility needle a little bit on congestion, we've implemented variable speed limits. Still a learning curve out there, seeing some good results. Certainly want to see safety improvements, but doing things like that make a difference. To the right of the screen, you'll see a tractor trailer. One of the very key things that we're doing across the state is installing interstate weigh-in motion scales out on the interstate. So trucks, when they go across and they're good, they get to keep moving. They don't have to slow down. They don't have to pull in unless they have an issue to all 19 weigh stations across the state. This project is actively under design and construction. It's a design-build project that's moving ahead. So we're excited about that, to have new technology to keep trucks moving, keep the freight rolling and not having to pull in. And finally, toward the bottom left of that screen is just another tool in the toolbox. As I mentioned, the divergent diamond. This is a picture of the divergent diamond at Ashford, Dunwoody, and 285. Again, a tool in the toolbox is try to figure out how to effectively and efficiently use all the assets that we have in a very cost-effective manner. In conclusion, I've shared a lot of numbers. I've given you a lot of overview of some of the things that Georgia DOT are doing to try to improve mobility for logistics, for freight, movement of freight and goods and people across this state. And finally, the number we still want to maintain is the one Governor Deal mentioned. We want to continue to be the #1 place to do business. Georgia DOT and the partnership with the Governor's office and the whole team, the state team, we're committed to continuing to keep that #1 ranking and do all we can to do that. I thank you for your time and thank you for thinking of Georgia.
Good job. That's good. All right, so moving on to our next speaker. Many of you probably already know Ed. Ed Crowell is the president and CEO of Georgia Motor Trucking Association. So let's hear a little bit more about the ground side of transportation.
Thanks, Paige. Good morning. Good morning. We'll be just for a couple of minutes talking about Washington, D.C., because as truckers, we have the unique ability or the unique quality that most of our issues aren't of our own creation. The trucking industry often pounds its head on the wall when it comes to the regulations, things like that, so we've got to touch on them a little bit. Those of you who've been here before know we also have to be a little bit literary since we're truckers. And this year we're going to add a little twist because we're going to add a little music too. The issues, one of the things we want to talk about here is Janis Joplin. Now, if you don't know who Janis Joplin is or was, just look for somebody with gray hair and they will tell you all about Janis Joplin. But Janis had a lot of political wisdom. And one of the things she did was a trucking song called Me and Bobby McGee. And if you don't know, that is a trucking song, and it's a great song for today's purposes. The song basically says that Janis and Bobby were busted flat in Baton Rouge, so they decided to get a ride down to New Orleans. Bobby thumbed a diesel down, and they were picked up by a safe, professional, courteous truck driver. It's in the song. And on the way down, they sang music all the way to New Orleans. Well, one of the most memorable lines of that song is, "Freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose." That's Janis's wisdom about Washington, D.C. Why nothing left to lose? I don't care if you like the administration or don't like the administration at the moment. This is just the political facts. They've got nothing left to lose because they lost the last election. They're not going to get their legislative agenda through. At the same time, the The Republicans who took over the legislature, the Senate and the House, aren't going to get their legislation through because the Democrats still have the White House and can veto everything. So the White House has nothing left to lose. That may not all be bad. It may lead to finally some compromise. In fact, we've seen a few signs of that out of Washington. But it does also lead to a lot of freedom on the regulatory environment. And this is an administration that, from its very beginning, has said that it wants to regulate more. So now it basically has an attitude of we will regulate because we can't legislate, and that's going to lead to a lot of situations where either future legislatures or future regulators have to change it, or it ends up in court. A lot of that affects trucking. Some of the philosophy of that seems to follow this writer, Elmore Leonard. Now, if you don't know who Elmore Leonard was, Elmore Leonard is one of America's most prolific writers. He wrote detective stories, he wrote crime novels, he wrote westerns. If you ever saw the old movie 3:10 to Yuma, Elmore Leonard did that. It was a Russell Crowe movie in the 2000s. It was actually a Gary Cooper movie in the 1950s. That's how long Elmore Leonard was a writer. Get Shorty. If you've ever watched the TV show Justified, that's Elmore Leonard. Well, Elmore Leonard's take on regulations was simply this: it doesn't have to make sense, it just has to sound like it does. That's the sort of thing that drives a trucker nuts. Here are just a few of the issues and few of the regulations we have to deal with. These are all current, and we could actually do another page probably, but these are all current in what's going on in Washington. We've got issues of motor carrier financial responsibility. 99% plus of all the claims against motor carrier are covered under the limits of the current rules, but they're talking about raising the limits. Even if they raise the limits, it actually increases the cost for truckers because what is now covered under excess insurance would be covered under primary insurance, which is always more costly. There are other issues in here. There are issues where the administration would like to see more people unionized. FMCSA is working on a driver pay study that's going to encourage more drivers to become employees so that they can be unionized. This is just the way things are working, and it's things that truckers have to deal with. One of my personal favorites is the one near the bottom there, CSA and the phone app. CSA, many of you will know, stands for Compliance, Safety, Accountability. It was originally a very good idea. It was going to provide FMCSA enforcement officers the ability internally to rank carriers and decide who needs more enforcement, who needs more attention. It's not a safety rating, but in the industry and in the shipping community, it's somehow become a safety rating. Problem with that is it's very flawed. Studies have shown, for instance, that a couple of the factors, they're called basics, are actually inversely related to safety. That is, the better your score according to FMCSA, the less safe you are as a motor carrier. So you don't want that to get out too much. You don't want to spread that around too much. You want to get it fixed. The General Accounting Office told FMCSA, you shouldn't be using this in public. FMCSA reacted by creating a smartphone app so that it's easier to see this stuff in public. This is why a trucker will pound his head on the wall when it comes to regulations. Now, as troublesome as Washington regulations are, they do have one saving grace in that they pretty much affect everybody equally. That's why it becomes important to look at state-level advantages and what a state has to offer, and that's where Georgia has a marked difference and a marked advantage. You've heard a little of it today, and you'll hear more of it in just a little bit, but we have great advantages here in Georgia in terms of logistics. We have over 1,800 freight hauling companies in the state. We have over almost 300,000 people employed in this industry. If something needs to move, the truckers can move it. We have great infrastructure, and we have now a new taxation scheme that'll help ensure that infrastructure gets better and better in the years to come. We have changed the property tax on our vehicles so that we're more competitive with other states. And the Georgia bureaucracy, things like the Department of Revenue and the Department of Driver Services, are getting more in tune with the idea that in order to move logistics, we have to make sure that truckers can be registered here and easily put people into their trucks. The Department of Driver Services, another bill that just passed actually yesterday, will allow them to create more CDL drivers, that is, move people more quickly. The tech schools here in Georgia are getting on board, and they're helping to train CDL drivers in better ways. More qualified drivers out there means more people sitting in the seats of trucks, means more opportunity for you to move your freight. We have true leadership in this state, a true top-to-bottom commitment. And I'll show you a little bit about that a little later, but let me show you more about what the state has to offer. Some of this you already heard from the commissioner, and I'm glad that my numbers match his numbers, which is always helpful. We have the 10th largest road system in the nation. We have almost 18,000 centerline miles of interstate and state routes to move freight on. A lot of others, we have 14,600 and some odd bridges, 4,500 miles of mainline and short-line railroads. Now, we like railroads. They are our partners. They may grouse a little about the size and weight of our trucks. We usually are not trying to do anything there, but we have a great relationship with them, and Georgia's railroads, short-line railroads and the main lines, are great corporate citizens, and we like working with them and partnering with them. We obviously have the world's busiest and best airport, and the 4th busiest container port, which is only going to move up to 3rd or 2nd, I think, and Curtis will tell us more about that, right? Yeah. One of the reasons we don't argue too much with the railroads, we do like to partner with them, but at the end of the day, Georgia trucks carry 85% of all the freight that moves in the state, all the manufactured freight, I should say, that moves in this state. If you include all freight, it drops to about 70%. You know, if you're in the logistics industry, you have to have trucks, and you have to have trucks ready, available, efficient to get the job done, or you're not in the logistics industry. We touch everything. And what does that look like? This is something I cribbed from the folk at Georgia Tech. It's also a DOT map created by the American Transportation Research Institute. Basically shows you what it looks like coming out of the ports. These are truck movements that come out of the ports, and as you can see, there are ports in Florida, but look at all the truck travel that goes down to Florida from the ports in Georgia. There are ports in South Carolina, but stuff comes into Savannah, and then the trucks carry it up the East Coast. We're competitive. That combination of trucks and ports makes us even more competitive on the entire East Coast. We have a great commitment to logistics, and I want to show you one other thing we have. Because you can't say you're committed to logistics or committed to your business unless you're serious about protecting your business and protecting your goods. And Georgia has been stepping up in the area of cargo safety for a number of years now. In 2009, Governor Perdue created the Major Cargo Theft Task Force in the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. And Governor Deal has expanded that to its largest presence yet. It is a great task force. These guys do a great job of protecting cargo and fighting cargo theft. And in addition, last year, under the leadership of a state representative named Jeff Duncan, the legislature approved probably the nation's best anti-cargo theft laws. We now have laws on the books to protect cargo and punish cargo thieves, and it's leading to results. The pictures here, if you can read this little one here, that's Sockman. Sockman supposedly sells you 4 packs of socks for $10 out of the back of his truck. What he was actually selling out of the back of his truck was stolen goods. The middle picture in particular was stolen cases of Hawaiian Punch. All right, anything's up for cargo theft. Stolen cases of Hawaiian Punch. To make it interesting, Sockman would sell these out of his truck for actually more than you could walk into Kroger or Publix and buy them. But people were buying them. Well, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation caught Sockman and convinced him that he wanted to be out of business. That's recovered cargo there. Back to Janis Joplin. Here's some folk with nothing left to lose. After they caught Sockman, Sockman proved that there is no honor among thieves, and he turned on the people in his cargo theft ring. The guy in the Hawaiian shirt is an officer. He has a reason to smile. The guy in the handcuffs doesn't have a reason to smile. Okay? That's Johnny Ray, who at one point had stolen over $3 million worth of cargo and is no longer doing that. The question is, why is the guy on the forklift in handcuffs smiling? Well, that's Buddy Riley. Buddy Riley was sitting on a forklift in handcuffs because once they caught him, they told him he had to reload all the cargo he'd stolen and put it back on the truck. And the 6 gentlemen on the far side sitting quite uncomfortably because they're all handcuffed are the people that Sockman turned in order to cut himself a better deal. Little humorous for us, not for them, but just another way to point out that Georgia's commitment to logistics actually does run top to bottom. I'll be glad to talk about those regulations anymore if you'd like, but I think we'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. So we're going to switch from trucks to trains. Please help me in welcoming Charles Tarbutton, who is a new board member of the Georgia Ports Authority, is the former chair of the Department of Economic Development, vice president with Sandersville Railroad, and also the president of the Georgia Railroad Association. Charles Tarbutton.
Thank you, Paige. Thank you, Paige. I suspect people wonder when I work. But I am delighted to be with you this morning. Good morning to you all. It's a pleasure to be here, and I will give you a brief overview of what is going on in the freight railroad industry and its significance in Georgia. There are 574 freight railroads in the United States. There are 7 major multi-state carriers like Norfolk Southern and CSX that are commonly referred to as Class 1 railroads. And there are 567 Class 2s and Class 3 railroads, the larger of which are commonly referred to as regional railroads, and the Class 3s are commonly referred to as short line railroads. All total, the industry represents about 140,000 route miles across the United States. We employ in total about 180,000 Americans, and the service that we provide to you and to other customers generates about $80 billion in revenue for our industry. I'm sure most of you know this, but it may come as a surprise to one or two of you that freight railroads are private, for-profit corporations that operate overwhelmingly on infrastructure that we own, build, maintain, and pay for, and by contrast to the other modes in the freight transportation system, which primarily are operating on and utilize infrastructure that is publicly owned and publicly financed. Safety is the first priority of every railroad and every rail employee, and railroads are safer today than ever before. A couple of slides here that show the gains in safety over the years. While the challenges of rail safety are always present, tremendous gains have been made since 1980. Employee injuries, train accidents, and highway grade crossings are all down 80+%. And today, in comparison to other industries, freight railroads have lower rates of employee injury than other modes of transportation and many other major industries. This is largely a result of regulatory reform. In 1980, policymakers, railroads, and customers all came together to pass landmark regulatory reform that permitted railroads with federal regulatory oversight the flexibility to decide which routes to operate over, what services to provide, and what prices to charge for those services, and based on market demand as opposed to regulatory fiat, which had been the prior regulatory construct. And so thanks to those reforms under the Staggers Rail Act of 1980, railroads could make their operations much more efficient. And quite frankly, most of those productivity gains have been passed on to rail shippers in the form of lower rates. Adjusted for inflation, average U.S. rail rates in 2013 were 42% lower than they were in 1981. This means that the average shipper can move nearly twice as much product for the same price that it did over 30 years ago. In addition to the enormous savings that rail shippers have enjoyed, this balanced regulatory environment has encouraged record levels of reinvestment by railroads in the infrastructure, equipment, and technology that we deploy every day. This investment continues to drive gains in safety, service, efficiency, and capacity. And last year, the railroads reinvested about $26 billion into their businesses, and this year plan to invest about $29 billion. In addition to the dollar investment, in 2014, railroads employed 12,000 or hired 12,000 new employees, and this year is projected to employ an additional 15,000 new employees. So in addition to providing safe and affordable and hopefully more reliable service to our customers, railroads provide substantial public benefits as well, and I'll talk about those for just a moment. One of the major public benefits that we provide is fuel efficiency, which has been steadily climbing. Last year, freight railroads, on average, moved 1 ton of freight 473 miles on 1 gallon of diesel fuel. And this is double the efficiency of 30 years ago. As we all appreciate, greenhouse gas emissions are directly related to fuel consumption, and the greater the fuel efficiency, that means less emissions and a lower carbon footprint for our companies and our customers, and that is of great importance to both of those groups. Railroads also help reduce the huge economic cost of highway congestion, and obviously you've heard a lot about that this morning in terms of what the state DOT and what the state of Georgia is doing to invest in our infrastructure, but studies show that highway congestion costs America about $120 billion per year in wasted time and fuel. And the solution for some of that, at least, is conversion to rail freight. A single train can carry the freight of several hundred trucks, freeing up space on our highways for other motorists, reducing maintenance and repair costs to roads and bridges, and potentially delaying expensive capacity additions. And notwithstanding the commitment that Georgia's leadership has demonstrated by our vote yesterday in the state Senate for substantially more transportation funding going forward. Despite that, there is still a very real and present funding challenge for transportation projects at all levels of government. Railroads carry the commodities that we depend on every day, whether it's energy to power our economy, farm food, and forest products, minerals and construction materials, chemicals, autos and heavy equipment, consumer goods of every kind. You'll find those on the railroad today. Just a graph here on traffic levels. As you can see, 2014 car loadings significantly outperformed 2013 and approached the pre-recession peaks of 2006. 2015 started off really strong, but they've eased a bit in February, as you can see here. Hopefully those will rebound. Now we'll talk a little bit about freight rail in Georgia, and my apologies to the commissioner because our numbers are a little different, but we'll need to get together on that because I'm sure mine are wrong. Georgia is served by 2 Class I railroads, as you know, Norfolk Southern and CSX. And my numbers reflect 23 operating short line railroads. We collectively operate about 4,700 miles of main track, serve almost 900 different rail stations, 30% of which are on short lines. About 185 million tons of freight move from, to, or through Georgia in 2013, and that is the equivalent of about 8.5 million truckloads. And we provide high-wage jobs to some 7,500 Georgians. A little bit about the 2 Class I railroads in Georgia, NS and CSX. You can see some of the data on those, but Georgia is a key state for both of those rail carriers. They have substantial operations in Georgia, particularly in metro Atlanta. Atlanta is home to Norfolk Southern's operating headquarters, and both Norfolk Southern and CSX have their corporate training facilities here in metro Atlanta where all new hires come for training. Georgia's 23 operating short line railroads comprise about 1,400 track miles. Incidentally, as you heard earlier, the third largest owner of track miles in Georgia behind Norfolk Southern and the CSX is the state of Georgia. And they own those lines but lease them to the operators that provide service over those routes. Much of the state-owned tracks are in rural parts of Georgia, which, were it not for the vision of state leaderships who preserved those rail lines years ago, customers and communities along those lines would have been cut off from the national rail network, jeopardizing existing jobs and diminishing chances for future economic development. Short line railroads use the same equipment. We are subject to the same laws, the same regulations, the same operating rules as Class 1 railroads, yet we are definitely small businesses. We operate on light density branch lines that more often than not were spun off by the Class 1s after the Staggers regulatory reforms because they were no longer economically viable for those Class 1s to operate. As a result, many of the branch lines that are operated by short lines in Georgia, which connect hundreds of local customers to the rail network, have some amount of deferred maintenance, which will require future reinvestment in order to continue service along those lines. Major rail terminals in Georgia, there are 4 major rail yards. Norfolk Southern and CSX both have large yards here in Metro Atlanta. And Norfolk Southern operates its Brosnan yard in Macon, and CSX has the Rice yard in Waycross, which is the largest rail yard in the southeastern United States. This just gives you a sense of the magnitude of the rail operations in Metro Atlanta. This is this shot is of the combined rail yards just west of downtown. And on the left in this photo is CSX's Tilford Yard, and on the right is Norfolk Southern's Inman Yard operations, and in the middle is NS's intermodal operations at Inman, which is one of their 2 yards here, one of their 2 intermodal operations in Metro Atlanta. There are 9 intermodal terminals in Georgia. CSX and Norfolk Southern each operate 2 intermodal yards here in Metro Atlanta, and they each operate 1 yard in their terminals at Savannah. Cordele Intermodal Services operates a yard at Cordele that is located on the Heart of Georgia Railroad, and Georgia Ports Authority has 2 on-dock facilities at Garden City, which I'm sure that Curtis will talk more about in a few moments. And to give you a graphic of Ed's comments about the interdependence between truck and rail, here's a picture of operations at Norfolk Southern's Inman Yard here in Atlanta. And this, as you can see, this is a great example of the interconnectedness of the freight transportation system between truck and rail and ocean carriage as well. Every container in this photo has either a last mile or first mile truck haul, or both in many instances. And this is a photo of the Mason Terminal at GPA's facility in Savannah, one of their 2 on-dock rail served facilities. This one, of course, is operated by Norfolk, or is served by Norfolk Southern, and GPA's Chatham Terminal is also on dock and served by CSX. There are 8 railroad-owned bulk transfer facilities in Georgia. CSX operates 4 transflow facilities in Atlanta, Augusta, Dalton, and Savannah, and NS operates 3 TBT terminals at Doraville, Augusta, and Dalton, and we operate a bulk transfer facility in Sandersville. And there are many more privately owned terminals and warehouses, reload centers across the state where railcar loads are received and then product is transferred to truck for final delivery to customer. Here's an example of a liquid transfer facility. And as you can see, bulk transfer and distribution is another example of where the strengths of rail and truck are combined to tailor a service to meet a particular customer's needs. There's one more of dry bulk distribution. And just a word about freight rail priorities. The U.S. DOT forecasts that total freight tonnage in the U.S. will increase by over 50% in the next 25 years, and that will require a substantial amount of new investment in all types of freight transportation infrastructure, including rail. Key to the Class 1 railroads' ability to meet this demand is a balanced regulatory environment that permits them to earn the rate of return on investment that's necessary for the infrastructure that is required for that demand. But for most short lines, however, additional funding sources will be needed to upgrade existing route and existing bridges, and there is an opportunity for the state to play a role in that. Georgia is one of a few states that still charges the sales tax on diesel fuel used in locomotives. This tax diverts funds away from railroad infrastructure reinvestment, and we feel, and courts in other states have found that to be a discriminatory tax. We'll see where we go in Georgia. And there are efforts underway here in Georgia and at the federal level, particularly in the shipper community, which we understand that, to increase truck size and weight limits. And bigger trucks significantly increase wear and tear on the state's already underfunded roads and bridges, and we believe it degrades safety for all motorists and increase highway congestion by diverting freight from other modes to the highways, and we believe that the current limits strike a reasonable balance between shipper's interest and the public interest. So with that, thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I look forward to any questions that you may have.
Good job. Thank you, Charles. Last but not least, as they say, maritime joke, the anchor of our panel this morning, Curtis Foltz, who's the Executive Director of the Georgia Ports Authority, tell us a little about what's going down in Savannah and its terminals. Thank you, Curtis.
Okay, I will extend my good morning as everyone else has so far today. Before I get into the presentation, a couple of quick things I think that are really relevant to why we're all here. You know, it's amazing how far this conference has come I think this is year number 7 that we've had. I participated in the first one with Paige. We had about 200 people, I think, attended Paige, and now we've got over 2,000 people. And, you know, again, logistics in Georgia, the importance that Georgia and Atlanta play in the whole network in the Southeast is just amazing. I think the second thing that I would ask as a takeaway from what you're hearing this morning, I've spent a lot of time in this business and industry bouncing around the country, and candidly, you're not going to find another state where you see this collaboration at all levels, whether it's the governor's office, whether it's the Department of Economic Development, Department of Transportation, the trucking industry, our railroad partners. We get it. We all work together. We are not concerned about who gets the credit, but we're concerned about pulling together as one Team Georgia to provide a transportation solution next to one. So it really is a pleasure to be here. I've been asked to give you a quick update on our ports. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them. Most of my time I'm going to focus on what's going on at our Garden City, our container facility, but I'll flip through them fairly quickly and look forward to questions afterwards. So for those that don't know, we're a statewide authority at the GPA. We manage and operate our facilities. We have deep water ports in Savannah and Brunswick. We have some inland terminals, as you can see on the map here. But our workhorse facilities, again, are in Brunswick, where we have multiple terminals, and in Savannah. What gets a lot of the headlines, and rightfully so, is our container terminal. It is it's called the Garden City facility, Garden City Terminal. It's in Garden City, Georgia. It is the single largest container terminal, single busiest container terminal in the United States, period. But we are the 4th busiest container complex in the United States. And when you think about those that we're competing against, you know, Los Angeles, Long Beach, really you should combine those as one gateway. So I would say they're one. The two of them are number 1. Number 2 would be New York, New Jersey, and then number 3 is the Georgia Ports Authority, represented by one terminal in Savannah, Georgia. What this graph represents, forget what we did last year or what we're doing over a single year period of time, but really in the last decade and a half, from 2000 to 2014, this graph lists the top ports, 10 ports, in terms of container throughput in the United States based on their 2014 volumes, and it's a compounded annual growth rate for that decade and a half. So for almost 15 years now, we've been growing at a rate that's really almost 3 times the rate of any other port in the United States. It's catapulted us from, at the beginning of this, not being in the top 10 ports in the country to being number 4. This business doesn't move on conveyor belts. We don't speed up the conveyor belt. It's about people. It's jobs that are tied to this growth. and it just speaks volumes for the importance of trade and commerce in the Southeast, following that demographic strength. And I was talking to our friends at the Home Depot before this session. Pat Allred remembered she predates me in working with the GPA, but back in the mid-90s, they really started what catapulted the growth wave through our ports in locating a distribution center in and around our ports. And we've grown with the Home Depot and many of our other partners and continue to bring new business opportunities into the Southeast through our ports. All right, so how are our ports doing in the most recent year? Really across all business sectors, and this is rare for us as a port. Typically one sector's up, another may be down, but for calendar year 2014, incredibly strong growth in total. Our total tonnage was up over 30 million tons, the first time we'd kind of crossed that 30 million ton barrier. By the way, all of these were record years for us, so it's not off of a down year. It was all up on top of a record year. Container volumes for calendar year 14, first time we cracked 3 million TEUs, 3.3 million TEUs. Automobiles, over 700,000 automobiles, primarily moving through our Colonel's Island facility down in Brunswick. Now, these are new automobiles. You may hear statistics at other ports throughout the country, but these are purely the new automobiles moving in a ro-ro fashion, and on and on and on with the statistics. So on any measure of scale, extremely strong and robust growth in the most recent calendar year. What we're dealing with right now, though, is a kind of a tsunami of business on the container side of the house. This statistic is our fiscal year to date, so it takes us, we run similar to the state, mid-year to mid-year, so July through June, takes us through the end of February. So for the first 8 months of this year, first 2/3 of this year, we're up almost 14%. Well, folks, that's about 4 times the growth rate that we projected this year. It's at volumes this year will do what we expected to do in 2018. We've worked out any of our, if you want to call it cushion. We have prided ourselves over the years on investing kind of ahead of the curve or ahead of the business. Well, we've worked that out, or it's gone now. And a lot of factors have driven our growth this year. We had a West Coast contractual issue with the waterfront union on the West Coast and management that has been in negotiation since last July. So there was cargo that was unnaturally diverted to the East Coast. I think that the way we've handled it has created long-term opportunities. There have been other challenges with capacity up and down the East Coast with the major ports, gateway ports up and down the East Coast. And then we've had continued success, as you've heard, with Georgia being the #1 state in the country to do business. And when businesses come to Georgia, generally they are dragging other businesses along or other cargo that's going to move through our ports because the ports are driving a lot of international opportunities. I just put this slide up real quickly again to speak to some of the challenges at the other major container gateways around the United States. Los Angeles, Long Beach has probably been the most challenged for the last 8 months. We need them to get healthy. The East Coast cannot handle all the volumes moving through the West Coast. They've taxed the East Coast ports. You can see here New York and New Jersey has been challenged to handle that incremental growth efficiently. Ports in Virginia have also been challenged, and those are really the gateway ports when you look up and down the East Coast. And then fortunately for us, we've handled this extreme growth, 4 years of growth, almost unnoticeable from a service perspective. And again, it's because of the great partners we've got on the trucking industry, our great partners in CSX and Norfolk Southern, and the vision that Georgia has had to build ahead of the need. If you invest when you need it in our business because everything's such long lead items, then you've missed the boat. You're going to have to deal with service issues. Why are our ports struggling today? For those of you that have heard me maybe speak at other events or national events, our ports in general across the country are not modernized at the level or invested in at the level that they need to be. So if you fly at 30,000 feet and look at our port network and you travel around the world, the U.S. port system is extremely fragile. And whether it's a snowstorm or a hurricane or a contractual challenge on one of the coasts, you quickly find out how fragile it is. So we need an improved federal system to update our ports. There's another little dynamic here. Ships are getting larger around the world, and candidly, folks, the port structure, and we've been operating ports the way we operate them since I got in this business 30 years ago, our ports are not prepared, generally speaking. The large ships play to our advantage in Savannah, but generally speaking, the port system in the United States is ill-prepared for the future needs. We have an advantage of being on a single terminal, so scale makes a difference in these larger ships and larger throughput. So again, it kind of plays to our advantage. Again, I talked about us priding ourselves in investing in the future. Just in the last 10 years, now this isn't what the state's done, what DOT's done outside of the ports, this isn't anything associated with the river. Purely modernizing our ports over the last 10 years, we've spent about $800 million. I'll challenge you to find another port that's done it as well as we have done. And maybe more importantly, over the next 10 years, we'll spend $1.4 billion growing our capacity, modernizing our ports, equipment, technology, densifying our operations, improving the velocity, all about preparing our ports for future long-term growth. This is our service area. It's not about just Georgia. We market this territory both with the trucking community and maybe more importantly, this outer reach with CSX and Norfolk Southern to make sure we have a great network to reach the entire Southeast. I'll kind of, one quick little comment about our deepening project. It is our single Achilles. If we have an Achilles, Savannah River isn't deep enough, isn't deep as it needs to be. We finally crossed the hurdle of all the approvals. We have got, between federal and state money, about $300 million of the $700 million needed to move this project forward. And the first major contract was awarded by the Army Corps of Engineers in February. And it was a $130 million contract to deepen the outer kind of channel of the Savannah River. Right now, we're projecting completing that project in 2018 to second half of 2018, first half of 2019. And to kind of wrap this up, so hopefully we'll leave a little time for Q&A. Your ports are healthy. Thank you for your business. We're going to continue to invest. We're going to continue to work with our partners throughout the state to make sure that our ports can handle your growth and any long-term needs you may have in the state. Thank you. Look forward to some questions.
Great job. Thanks. Okay, so we are running right about on schedule. Let me start with questions from the audience, if anybody has any. We have mic runners. I can't see any of you anyway. We have mic runners. There's a question over here on the left. My left.
Curtis, has business that was diverted to Savannah begun to return to the West Coast?
Hello, hello, hello. There I am, live. Great question. The question, if you didn't hear it, has the business that was diverted to the East Coast converted back to the West Coast? Some of it has. There were several incremental vessels that were introduced into East Coast trades. The bulk of those ships hit at kind of in that March, the month we're in right now, March time frame throughout April. You'll see some naturally going to go back to the East Coast, West Coast. We're not going to retain 100% of it. And candidly, right now, short term, it's probably not sustainable up and down the East Coast if you see what's going on. But I do think, different than I would have answered the question a year ago, because of the way that Georgia and our ports have handled this incremental growth, we've won new business opportunities. And I think you're seeing a lot of people rethink that whole diversification strategy, West Coast, East Coast, and many, many more people are going to look to Georgia. So some of it clearly will stick on through, at least through our ports.
Thank you. Next question.
I had a question.
Okay, go for it. wherever you are.
Good morning. My name is Angela Grace. I'm a recruiter of international companies into the Southeast. And my question is for the whole panel. We've talked a little bit about the classic, how do you invest in new growth and encourage new development? And my question is, what kind of innovative solutions or new solutions has your group come up with to tackle sort of this age-old problem?
Anybody want to jump in first?
Well,
So, please.
I'm not sure we've got any secret sauce to.
That's a tough question.
To kind of the whole recruiting mix. I will say at the GPA, we've got a very robust HR group. Fortunately, we've got a greater demand for those coming to work for the Georgia Ports Authority than we have supply of available positions. We have been in a fairly aggressive hiring mode and probably will be for the next year or so. But we're maybe in one of those enviable positions where we've got a longer line out the door wanting to work for us than we've got jobs right now.
Yeah, Miguel, please.
Well, by our estimates, and this is really a crisis that the airport industry is facing, not only here in North America, but in Europe as well, we simply didn't do a very good job of succession planning. Over the next 18 months, 3 years, at any given time, you will have 3 or 4 major airports in this country looking for airport leaders. Right now we have LAX, Los Angeles, we have Chicago, I believe Milwaukee. And it is estimated that about 1/4 of the 450-something commercial airports will be having directors or heads that will be retiring. Last week I was in Washington, D.C., and one consultant estimates that the number is actually higher. About 1/3 of the 450 commercial airports will be having leaders that will be retiring. What you're going to see, 2 things happening. Not only will you see a lot of transition between airports and people poaching from one another, but you'll also see the second-tier airport management level as well as the mid-tier level. You will see a lot of movement once those from the top would leave. Quite frankly, it's going to drive up costs because if there's a greater competition for executives, compensation is going to be a major issue. And it's really almost at a crisis level, and you'll see this over the next 18 months to 3 years. Yeah. And we're addressing it a number of ways. Quite frankly, we're utilizing more the services of recruiters. Korn Ferry, a number of companies, we're having to get on board to be able to get the best value for money because it's very competitive.
Yeah, for sure. Workforce, people, talent's getting harder and harder to find and keep. All these industries are so much connected across all of your businesses as well. The truck driver shortage keeps coming up as well. Just maybe to that point on workforce, how are we going to be able to do what we need to do to have safe, qualified drivers in our industry going forward?
To the question in terms of innovation, trucking has a unique advantage in that it is so atomized, if you will. There are so many thousands of individual firms that what you've got is constant experimentation. That is, rather than one-size-fits-all solutions, you've got people always trying to do a little bit better job. In the industry in the last few years, we've seen increasing penetration of telematics, even to smallest companies. So somebody walking in that may only have 10 trucks is still going to have satellite communications, route optimization, and other electronic tools to make their service more efficient than it's ever been in the past. Additionally, we're doing more and more with the state in terms of recruiting quality drivers, and the trucking companies are being more and more creative in what they can do to retain those quality drivers. So that innovation is system-wide, but it's diverse, and in being so diverse, you're going to find different solutions in different areas. It's one of the flexibilities that trucking offers.
Thank you. Well, I'm being told we are out of time, and Janine wants to get back up here and get you moving on your next session. These guys will be around for a little bit longer. Please come up and ask them questions afterwards, and enjoy the rest of the summit.